Many African Americans were drawn to Omaha, particularly during the period of the Great Migration, due to the availability of jobs in packing plants and on other railroads. These jobs typically paid much better than the other jobs that were open to African Americans in the South. Jobs on the railroad and packing houses helped many African Americans not only financially but socially as well. Although only jobs available to African Americans on the railroads were labor and service positions, as a construction worker, porters, waiters, and cooks. These jobs paid well enough that African Americans were able to climb out of poverty and join the ranks of working and middle classes. These often raised their standing within the black community. African Americans that owned local businesses and worked on the railroads or in packing plants offered positive role models for other in communities to look up to.
Mr. Raymond Willis was kind enough to take the time to share some of his experiences with us. Mr. Willis worked as a porter on the Union Pacific Railroad from 1964 to 1966. He was born and raised in Omaha and came of age during the 1950s and 60s. His father was born in Atchison, Kansas, raised in Chicago, and met Mr. Willis's mother when he came to Omaha in the early 1940s.
Well, I was going to attend UNO. It was a very good opportunity to work. Normally, when we get laid off around the time for school to start, and at that time I attended was Omaha University at that time, which is UNO at this time.
Mr. Willis explained to us how he got the job as a porter and his family's history working on the railroads.
Well, my dad worked for over the years. He worked for three of the presidents of the railroad. So it always that was, I have to say, was my foot in the door was through my dad, because he had worked for a long family of railroad people. I have both grandfathers, my maternal and paternal, uncles, my dad. So a lot of we found, especially back in those days, a lot of it was a kind of a family affair. You know, if you somebody in your family, another family member got through the door through another family member. No, my dad was what they call a business car steward. He worked on the private business cars of three of the presidents of the railroad. He was responsible for the serving the meals, keeping up the car, and a lot of just about everything that you can imagine to keep his house on wheels in order.
While working on the railroad, Mr. Willis was able to travel across the nation. Since the mobility of African Americans was restricted throughout much of their history, this ability to travel was yet another aspect of the job that made it so desirable. Mr. Willis told us that porters departing from Omaha were given the option to travel four main routes: from Omaha to Ogden, Utah, from Omaha to Cheyenne, Wyoming, from Omaha to Denver, Colorado, and from Omaha to Pocatello, Idaho.
Well, I think as growing up here in Omaha, uh, as a child, we didn't have I guess really, to be honest with you, didn't have a lot of dreams because, of course, back in those days, there weren't a lot of things that we could do as black Americans. So for me, I really didn't have a lot of dreams. I had aspirations to go to college. Uh, but as far as just dreams, I guess as every kid, we go out to the Rosenblatt Stadium to see the Omaha Cardinals back at them times. I wanted to be a baseball player, but uh, that would probably sum up any dreams that I had. But you think that it's kind of hard to believe, and I think it's the young folks don't understand some of the things that went on. they were going on here in Omaha. You kind of think of the South because you see the different pictures with the dogs and the fire hoses and the colored signs and all like that. But the things that are really going on up north also, it was just a little more, you might say, kind of more camouflage, than it was down south. It was just, but these things were. Well, at that time, I wasn't looking at it as my future. Uh, I was hoping to hopefully maybe get maybe in the headquarters building or the office, but that at that point there, that wasn't an option. That wasn't allowed to, minorities at that time. So it was something that it was to get me from point A to B, and I knew this going into it. And I knew there was no room for advancement or anything, but it supplied me with things to get me, to do, to be able to do some of the other things that I want to do. Which, of course, then I eventually did get back to the headquarters. I did work in the headquarters building, so it finally did work out. But as to answer your question there, though, no, I didn't. It was just accepted. I knew when I applied that it wasn't, regardless of my qualifications, that the application that I got would only, it was the only thing that was offered. You was a porter, waiter, or a cook. So it wasn't anything up for negotiations or for discussion. So and you just knew that. You knew that at that time.